When I first moved in with Ethan, I thought he was just another guy I'd share rent and Wi-Fi with. Nothing more. We met through a mutual friend who was moving out. I needed a room, he needed someone who could actually pay bills on time. It felt easy, casual, like the kind of arrangement that wouldn't change anything important in my life. But then I met him. Ethan was one of those people who made space feel smaller just by being in it. Tall, broad-shouldered, sun-warmed skin, the kind of athletic build that looked effortless. His laugh was easy, unfiltered, and always a little louder than the moment called for. He had that kind of presence that filled a room before he even spoke. And from the first day, I noticed the way he looked at people. Direct, warm, a little too long. It wasn't flirting, it was curiosity. But when his eyes landed on me, sometimes it felt like more than that. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 shared bathroom, a kitchen that could barely fit 2 people without a collision. We lived on instant ramen, bad coffee, and half-finished Netflix series. But it worked. Somehow it worked. He was the kind of roommate who'd make extra pancakes, just in case you're hungry, or leave a sticky note on the fridge that said, "Don't forget your presentation today, you've got this." Small things. Things that shouldn't mean much. But they did. It was the little moments that started it. The quiet mornings when he'd walk out of his room, hair a mess, eyes half open, and still manage to smile at me. The late nights when we'd end up on the couch, both pretending to be focused on whatever movie was playing, even though neither of us cared about the plot anymore. Sometimes our legs would touch, just a brush. He never moved away. And neither did I. I told myself it was nothing. That I was just reading too much into it. Because Ethan was straight. He talked about girls, dated occasionally, texted people whose names I never learned. And yet, there were moments, fleeting, quiet ones, when I caught him looking at me like he was trying to figure something out. One night it rained. Not the wild, dramatic kind of storm, just soft rain, steady like background music for a city that didn't sleep. We sat on the couch, wrapped in separate corners of the same blanket, watching the reflections of streetlights dance on the window. He glanced at me and for a second I forgot how to breathe. "Cold?" he asked, voice low. "A little," I said, though it wasn't the weather making me shiver. Without saying a word, he shifted closer and pulled the blanket tighter around us. His thigh brushed mine, solid, warm. I could smell the faint scent of his shampoo mixed with rain. "Better?" he asked. I nodded, but my chest felt tight. We didn't talk after that. We just sat there, silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy but safe at the same time. Every few minutes, I felt him glance at me. I didn't look back, but I knew. You can feel it when someone's looking at you like that. When the movie ended, neither of us moved to turn off the TV. The credits rolled in the dark, the room filled only with the hum of rain and the rhythm of our breathing. Eventually he exhaled, soft, almost a sigh. "Night, man," he said, voice quiet. "Night," I answered, but my voice came out rougher than I meant. In my room I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The sound of rain against the window was steady, like a heartbeat I couldn't escape. And I kept thinking about the way he'd looked at me, the pause before he smiled, the way his voice had softened. It was probably nothing. That's what I told myself. But somewhere deep inside I already knew it wasn't. Because when I closed my eyes, I could still feel the warmth of his leg against mine. And I could still see that look, the one that lingered a second too long, the one that made my chest ache in a way I didn't have words for. That night I fell asleep wondering if maybe, just maybe, Ethan wasn't as unreadable as I thought. And that maybe, the way he looked at me meant something I wasn't supposed to see. But did. The heater broke that week. Our landlord said he'd get someone to look at it, which in this building meant maybe by spring. November air crept in through the windows, sharp enough that even coffee couldn't chase it away. Ethan joked that we could see our breath inside. I laughed, but every night I piled on 2 hoodies and buried myself in blankets that never felt warm enough. That Friday he came home late from soccer practice. Cheeks flushed, hair damp, jacket dripping rain onto the entry mat. He shook the water from his hair, grinning at me like the cold didn't bother him at all. "Dude, it's freezing," he said, rubbing his hands together. "No kidding," I answered. "My room feels like the inside of a fridge." He hesitated then, one of those tiny pauses you don't notice until afterward. His eyes flicked toward his room. "You can crash in mine if you want. It's warmer in there. I've got an extra blanket." I blinked. "You sure?" "Yeah," he said too casually. "We're not in high school. It's just a bed. Just a bed." I told myself that as I brushed my teeth, as I turned off my light, as I stood in his doorway watching him scroll on his phone, bare-chested under the dim lamp glow. He looked up. "Left side's yours," he said, tossing me a grin before turning back to his screen. I tried to act normal but my pulse wouldn't slow. I slipped into the bed carefully, leaving space between us, a polite, safe distance. The mattress dipped under my weight. His shoulders shifted. The air felt different, heavy somehow. He turned off the lamp. Darkness swallowed the room except for the faint blue streetlight spilling through the blinds. I listened to his breathing, slow, even. I stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about the warmth radiating from his side of the bed. 10 minutes passed. Maybe more. Then I felt it, the soft brush of his leg against mine. I froze. Sorry, he muttered, half asleep. But he didn't move away. Neither did I. Another minute, maybe two. Then, slowly I felt his hand move, not bold, not sure, just searching. The blanket rustled, and his fingers hesitated near my waist before resting there lightly. The air left my lungs. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words caught in my throat. His touch wasn't demanding. It wasn't even deliberate. It felt like instinct, something he did without thinking, something that made sense to his body even if it didn't to his mind. His breath brushed the back of my neck. Steady. Real. And all I could do was lie there, still, every nerve alive. After a while he shifted closer, just enough that his chest barely touched my back. The warmth of him flooded through me, grounding and disarming all at once. I could feel his heartbeat against my spine. And then I realized something that scared me. I didn't want to move. The world outside blurred, rain, cars, the faint hum of the city. In that bed it was just us, breathing, existing in a silence too fragile to break. Somewhere between awake and asleep, I let go. My body relaxed against his, cautiously, carefully, until our breathing found the same rhythm. He didn't pull away. He just stayed there, his arm heavy over me, his warmth soaking through the thin cotton of my shirt. For a while, I let myself pretend this meant nothing. Just comfort. Just heat. But then he whispered so softly I almost thought I imagined it. Night. The sound of his voice that close to my ears sent something wild through me, not lust, not fear, just ache. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to look at him. But I didn't. Because if I did, if I met his eyes in that dark space between maybe and almost, I wasn't sure what would happen. So I stayed still, memorizing the feeling of his arm around me, the faint smell of rain in his hair, the steadiness of his breath. When I finally drifted off, I dreamt of nothing in particular, just warmth and the strange, impossible comfort of being wanted in a way that didn't have a name. When I woke, sunlight was bleeding through the blinds and he was already up, standing by the window, stretching. He turned when he heard me stir. Sleep okay? Yeah, I said, trying to sound normal. He smiled, that easy, casual smile, and said, told you it's warmer in here. And just like that, it was over. Or at least we pretended it was. But all morning as we made coffee and joked about the cold, I could still feel where his arm had been, a phantom weight that refused to fade. And for the first time, I realized we'd crossed a line we couldn't fully uncross. It was still friendship, still safety, still normal on the surface. But underneath, there was something neither of us wanted to name. Too close to be nothing. Too quiet to be everything. The morning after that night, we both pretended it hadn't happened. Ethan moved around the kitchen like usual, shirtless, hair still damp from his shower, humming some song under his breath. I sat at the counter, watching the steam rise from my mug, trying not to stare too long at the curve of his shoulders in the morning light. He slid a plate of eggs toward me. You'll freeze to death if you don't fuel up. I managed a half smile. Thanks. He nodded, took a bite of toast, and that was it. Like nothing had happened. Like his arm hadn't been around me all night. Like I hadn't felt his heartbeat against my back. The silence wasn't awkward exactly, it was something else. Something charged. Every time our eyes met, one of us would look away too quickly. Every sound felt louder than it should, the scrape of a fork, the creak of a chair, the rush of water in the sink. It stayed that way for days. We didn't talk about the night in his bed. But the space between us was different now. Smaller. He started bumping into me more, reaching past me for the cereal box, brushing against my shoulder when we crossed paths. Little accidents that didn't feel accidental. And yet, neither of us said a word. One evening, I found him on the balcony, hoodie zipped up, the city lights flickering against his face. The air was cold enough to see our breath. He didn't look up when I joined him. You ever think about how quiet it gets up here? He said softly. Sometimes, I answered. It's weirdly peaceful. Yeah. He paused. Peaceful but kind of lonely too, right? I studied him, the way his hands gripped the railing, the way his eyes avoided mine. I guess, I said. Though it doesn't feel that lonely lately. He turned then just slightly. His eyes searched mine for a moment too long, then he looked away again, jaw tightening. "I've just been thinking," he said, voice lower now. "About stuff." "What kind of stuff?" He hesitated. "You ever get close to someone and it just changes what you thought you knew about yourself?" My heart stuttered. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I think I know what you mean." The silence that followed wasn't empty this time. It was full of things unsaid, things we didn't yet have the language for. He exhaled, the breath visible in the cold air. "Sometimes I don't know what to do with that." I didn't know what to say. So I just stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder, both of us staring out at the glowing skyline like it could give us answers. For a long time we didn't move. The hum of traffic below, the wind, the faint echo of music from someone's open window, all of it felt far away. Finally he spoke again, barely a whisper. "You sleeping in your room tonight?" I hesitated, pulse quickening. "Do you want me to?" He looked at me then. Really looked, eyes open, honest, a little afraid. "I don't know," he said. But it was nice. Having someone there. The way he said it, soft, almost fragile, hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to tell him I'd felt the same. That I hadn't slept like that in years, that I missed his warmth even now. But the words got stuck somewhere in my chest. So I just nodded. Yeah, it was nice. He smiled faintly, that half smile that always seemed to hide something behind it, and turned back toward the city. The moment stretched, delicate and unspoken. When he finally went inside, I stayed out there alone, watching his reflection disappear through the sliding door. The balcony felt colder without him beside me. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling again the way I always seemed to lately. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. I could hear faint footsteps in the next room, the creak of his floorboards, the rustle of his sheets. Some part of me hoped he couldn't sleep either. And when I finally drifted off, I dreamt of nothing but stillness, that perfect, unbearable stillness that hung between us now. Something had shifted. It wasn't just friendship anymore. We hadn't said it. We hadn't touched. But the silence was starting to say everything for us. It had been a few days since that conversation on the balcony, and though neither of us said a word about it, something was undeniably different. It was in the way he moved around me now, quieter, slower, as if every motion carried a thought he didn't know how to name. It was in the pauses between our jokes, in the way his laughter faded into something softer when our eyes met. We didn't need to talk about it to feel it. It was there, pulsing beneath everything ordinary. That Thursday, I came home late from class. The lights in the living room were dim, the TV still on, playing some half-finished movie. Ethan was sprawled on the couch, one arm thrown over his eyes, the blanket tangled around his legs. I hesitated at the doorway. "You're gonna ruin your back sleeping like that," I said quietly. He stirred, lifting his arm just enough to see me. "Didn't mean to crash. Guess I got comfortable." "Come on," I said, walking over. "Bed's 5 steps away. You'll thank me in the morning." He mumbled something that sounded like too tired, but still pushed himself up halfway, blinking the sleep from his eyes. "Hey," I said softly, crouching down beside him. "You okay?" He gave a small, lazy grin. "You worry too much, you know that?" "Maybe," I said, smiling. "Somebody has to." His blanket slid off his shoulder as he sat up, and without thinking, I reached out to pull it back over him. My fingers brushed his chest, warm, solid, heartbeat steady under my palm. The touch froze us both. For a moment the world stopped moving. No TV, no clock, no sound except the soft rhythm of his breathing. His eyes opened wider, caught mine, and held them. I should have pulled my hand back. I didn't. Then, slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand and placed it over mine. "Don't," he whispered. My breath caught. "Don't what?" "Don't move," he said again, quiet, firm like a confession. His fingers tightened slightly over mine, keeping my hand there, against his skin, against the warmth that was now impossible to ignore. Time blurred. I don't know how long we stayed like that, seconds, minutes, but it felt infinite. Every heartbeat between us said something neither of us could. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Why does this feel so right?" I swallowed hard. "Because maybe it is." He looked at me for a long time, eyes full of something raw, searching, scared. Then, as if realizing what was happening, he suddenly stood up, stepping back, running a hand through his hair. "Sorry," he muttered, turning away. "That was weird. Ethan." "It's fine," he said quickly, too quickly. "I'm just tired. Forget it, okay?" But I couldn't forget it. He disappeared into his room, the door clicking shut behind him. I stood there for a while, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. The warmth from where he'd touched me lingered long after he was gone, a phantom echo under my skin. The next morning he was already in the kitchen when I woke up, pretending everything was normal again. "Coffee?" he asked without looking at me. "Yeah," I said quietly. He poured a cup, slid it across the counter. His fingers brushed mine for half a second, enough to make me flinch, enough to make both of us pause. Then he smiled, too casually, and turned away. We went on like that for days. Laughing, cooking, studying, like nothing had happened. But every time he walked past me, I could feel the distance between us bending, not breaking. One night, I woke up to the sound of him in the hallway. I didn't move, just listened. His footsteps stopped outside my door, lingered there for a few seconds, and then retreated. That was when I knew. He wasn't pretending because he didn't feel anything. He was pretending because he did. And maybe he was scared of what it meant, scared of what it made him. So was I. But as much as we tried to go back to how things were, we couldn't. Not really. The touch had stayed, not on my skin but somewhere deeper. A quiet reminder that we had crossed a line neither of us meant to, and that some part of both of us didn't want to go back. The tension didn't fade, it just softened into something quieter. Days passed like slow tides, routine on the surface, ripples underneath. We still did everything together. Classes, groceries, the same stupid sitcom at night. But whenever he laughed, I noticed how his eyes flicked toward me first, like he was checking that I was laughing too. And when our shoulders brushed on the couch, he didn't move anymore. Neither did I. One night, rain hammered the windows again. The power flickered, and the movie we were watching froze mid-scene. We sat in the blue glow of the paused screen, the air thick with everything we hadn't said. "Guess that's our cue," he murmured. But he didn't move to fix it. Instead, he stared at the frozen image, voice barely above a whisper. "You ever think we're weird?" I looked over. "Define weird." He gave a nervous laugh, rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't hang out with anyone like this. I mean, we share food, share a bed sometimes, finish each other's sentences. I don't do that with other guys." My chest tightened. "Does it bother you?" He shook his head slowly. "That's the thing. It doesn't. And I don't get why." The room went still. The rain softened like it was listening. He kept talking, eyes fixed on the floor. "I keep telling myself it's just friendship, but then I'll think about you. About that night. And it's like my brain can't decide what to call it." I swallowed. "Maybe you don't have to call it anything." He looked up then, the kind of look that goes straight through you. "It doesn't feel like nothing," he said quietly. Something inside me unraveled. I set my drink down, palms sweating. "Ethan." He waited, patient, trembling. I could see the pulse in his throat. "I don't know what this is either," I said, voice shaking. "But I know how it feels. And it doesn't feel wrong." The silence that followed felt holy somehow, fragile, suspended between heartbeats. He moved first, slow, uncertain, reaching out as if the air itself might break. His fingers brushed mine, tentative, testing. I didn't pull away. Our hands stayed there, barely touching, the space between our skin humming with a kind of electricity that wasn't loud, just alive. He exhaled, eyes shining. "I hate that I'm scared of this." "Me too," I whispered. Then he did something so small I almost missed it. He leaned forward until his forehead touched mine. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't even meant to be. Just a breath shared. A confession without words. I closed my eyes. His skin was warm, his breath steady. For a few seconds we stayed like that, two people suspended between fear and relief, realizing that maybe what we'd been avoiding wasn't danger at all. When he finally pulled back, his voice was barely audible. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not freaking out," he said, smiling sadly. "For letting this be whatever it is. I wanted to say you don't have to thank me. But instead I said softly, I'm here. That's all I know." He nodded, eyes glassy with something he didn't name. Then he leaned back against the couch, staring at the flickering TV. We didn't touch again that night. We didn't need to. When I went to bed later, the world felt lighter, like something heavy had finally fallen away. It still scared me, how much I wanted him, how right it felt to want him, but for the first time I wasn't alone in it. And that thought stayed with me as I drifted to sleep. Maybe this wasn't confusion anymore. Maybe it was clarity. Quiet, terrifying, beautiful clarity. After that night, everything slowed down. Not in a bad way, more like when a song finally finds its rhythm. We stopped pretending, though we never said it out loud. There were no labels, no big talks. Just a quiet understanding that something had changed, and that neither of us wanted to fix it. Mornings became softer. He'd shuffle into the kitchen half awake, hoodie falling off one shoulder, and I'd already have coffee waiting. He'd grin at me, sleepy, the kind of grin that made the room feel warmer than it really was. Sometimes he'd drift close enough that our arms brushed when we reached for mugs. It always happened by accident, but neither of us moved away anymore. The space between us wasn't empty now, it was full of small, ordinary things that suddenly felt extraordinary. One Sunday, sunlight spilled through the blinds like melted gold. I was curled on the couch reading. He came in from the shower, hair damp, wearing that faded gray t-shirt he loved. He dropped down beside me with a sigh, head falling against the back cushion. "What are you reading?" "Something for class." He nodded, quiet for a moment, then said, "You ever feel like life's moving too fast?" "Yeah," I said. "All the time." He exhaled through a laugh. "Sometimes I wish I could freeze it, you know? Just the good parts." I looked up. "What would you freeze right now?" He tilted his head toward me, half smiling. "Maybe this." The room went still. I could hear the clock ticking, the hum of the fridge, his breath syncing with mine. Without thinking, I reached out and brushed a drop of water from his hair. My fingers lingered a second too long, tracing the curve behind his ear. He didn't move. He just looked at me, that open, uncertain look I was starting to know by heart. Then slowly he leaned in. It wasn't dramatic or rushed. Just the simplest, smallest motion, until the space between us disappeared and his lips brushed mine. Soft, brief, real. When he pulled back, his eyes were wide, like he was waiting for the world to fall apart. But I smiled. "It's okay," I whispered. Something in him eased. His shoulders dropped, the tension fading from his jaw. He smiled too, a quiet, disbelieving thing. Yeah. He looked down, rubbing his thumb over his knee. "I don't know what I'm doing." "Neither do I said. "But maybe that's fine." After that, we fell into a rhythm that didn't need words. We still watched movies, still argued about whose turn it was to wash dishes, still teased each other the same way, but now there were small touches stitched between everything. A hand brushing mine when he passed the remote. A knee against my thigh that stayed there a second longer than it used to. A glance that said we know even when no one else did. One night, he was at his desk, sketching plans for a project. I sat on the floor beside him, scrolling through music. Out of nowhere, he said, "You ever think about how weird it is that we met by accident?" I looked up. "Yeah. Kind of feels like the universe tripped on purpose." He laughed, that quiet, honest laugh I'd grown addicted to, and reached down to ruffle my hair. I caught his hand before he could pull it away, holding it there for just a heartbeat. His eyes softened. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. There are moments that don't demand grand gestures. Just a hand held. A silence shared. A feeling that settles so deeply you stop questioning it. Later that week, we were sitting on the fire escape, watching the city lights flicker. He passed me his beer, then leaned his head against my shoulder. "You ever think we're gonna screw this up?" he asked quietly. "Probably," I said. He laughed. "That's honest." "But," I added, "if we do, it'll be because we tried. Not because we were afraid to." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I didn't know I was waiting for this." "For what?" "For you," he said, so softly I almost didn't hear it. The words hit something deep in me, that ache I'd been carrying since the first night he looked at me a little too long. I turned my head, resting my chin lightly against his hair. Me neither. The city kept moving below us, cars, voices, life, but up there it felt like time had stopped again. He reached for my hand, fingers intertwining easily this time, like they'd been practicing all along. We stayed that way until the chill crept in, until the lights blurred into constellations. No labels. No explanations. Just warmth and quiet, and the steady truth that whatever this was, it had already begun. Mornings used to be background noise. Now they feel like something sacred. The sunlight doesn't just fall through the blinds anymore. It arrives, slow and deliberate, like it knows it's welcome here. I woke up before him that morning. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty. Just soft. Lived in. Ethan was still asleep beside me, arm draped across my chest, hair a messy halo against the pillow. His breathing was steady, slow exhales that seemed to sync with the rhythm of the city outside. For a while I didn't move. I just watched him, the tiny furrow in his brow, the way his lips parted slightly, the faint line where sunlight touched his collarbone. He wasn't perfect, neither was I. But in that moment I couldn't think of a single thing I'd change. Eventually he stirred, eyes blinking open. It took him a second to realize where he was, where we were. Then his gaze met mine and something in his expression softened. the sleepy confusion melting into a smile that looked like home. "Morning," he mumbled. "Hey," I whispered back. He stretched, his hand brushing my side before settling on my chest again. "Did I snore?" he asked, voice rough. "Like a chainsaw," I said, grinning. He groaned. "Liar." I laughed and he laughed too, the kind of laugh that made my heart do that quiet, stupid thing where it forgot what rhythm was for a second. He sat up, rubbing his face. "We should probably get up. Work doesn't stop just because he trailed off as if unsure what word to end with. I didn't push him. I just said, "Yeah. But maybe breakfast first." He glanced at me, smiling again, that shy kind of smile that still caught me off guard. "You making it or am I?" "Let's not ruin the morning with lies," I said. He threw a pillow at me and got up, padding barefoot toward the kitchen. The smell of coffee filled the air, and the sound of the pan sizzling joined it. I leaned against the counter, watching him flip eggs like he actually knew what he was doing. He caught me staring and raised an eyebrow. "You good?" "Yeah," I said. "Just watching." He shook his head, grinning. "Creep. Maybe I was. Maybe I didn't care." He plated breakfast for both of us and set the mugs down. We ate mostly in silence, not the awkward kind, but the easy kind that comes after you've said everything that really matters. Every now and then he'd look up, quick, almost shy glances, and each time I felt that same quiet rush in my chest. When we finished, he leaned back, stretching again. "So," he said, "what now?" I looked at him, unsure whether he meant breakfast or us. Maybe both. He seemed to realize it too, because his expression softened, and his next words came out quieter. "I mean, this. Whatever this is." I took a breath. The sunlight had climbed higher now, catching in the small dust motes between us, making the room look like it was holding its breath. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I don't want to run from it." He nodded slowly, eyes flicking down to his coffee cup. "Yeah." He turned the mug in his hands, tracing the rim. "It's weird. I've never felt like this before, not with anyone. And part of me keeps waiting for it to make sense." "Maybe it's not supposed to," I said. "Maybe it's just supposed to feel right?" He looked up, then meeting my gaze. "It does." The words hung between us, small, steady, real. He stood, moving closer until he was standing right in front of me. His hand hesitated for a second before reaching up to touch my face, his thumb brushing just below my lip. "I don't know what to call this," he whispered. I smiled, leaning into his touch. "You don't have to." For a long time we just stayed there, morning light, the smell of coffee, his hand against my skin. No promises. No labels. Just the quiet certainty that whatever it was, it mattered. Later, when we were cleaning up, he started humming some tune I didn't recognize, and I joined in without thinking. He laughed, shaking his head. "You're tone deaf." "Probably," I said, bumping his shoulder. He bumped back, playful. Then his expression softened again, voice dropping. "You make this feel easy," he said. I froze, halfway through rinsing a plate. "Easy?" "Yeah," he said. "Like maybe it doesn't have to be complicated. Like maybe I can just be." I looked at him, then really looked, at the faint scar on his chin, the crinkle near his eye when he smiled, the way he was looking at me like he finally stopped fighting something. And I realized I didn't need anything else from him, no grand confession, no perfect sentence to sum it all up. We already understood it. That night, I stood on the balcony again, the same place we'd stood months ago when all this began. The city glowed beneath us, familiar, endless. Ethan came out behind me, a blanket draped over his shoulders. He wrapped part of it around me too, standing close enough that I could feel his breath against my neck. "Cold?" he asked. "A little." He leaned in just enough to whisper, "Not anymore, right?" I smiled, eyes closing for a moment. "Not anymore." We stayed like that, quiet, steady, watching the city breathe. His hand found mine under the blanket, our fingers locking together, not like a secret but like a truth. And in that quiet, I thought about everything that had brought us here, the nights of silence, the confusion, the small touches that became something bigger. It hadn't been perfect. It hadn't been planned. But it was ours. When I looked at him again, he was already watching me, that same look he gave me the first night. I noticed something different in his eyes. Only this time there was no fear in it. Just warmth. Just knowing. Whatever this becomes, love, friendship, something we never quite name, I know I wouldn't trade it for anything. I didn't expect it. I didn't ask for it. But I wouldn't undo it for the world.